Hello and welcome to Power Culture Coco, home of the Coco. I have ideas. We are continuing our Madonna Wh-re complex series. And wow, what a wild and dysfunctional adventure into the patriarchal wounds of the collective psyche this has been. So, we are building on our last chat where we established how the Madonna Wh-re social archetypes are leveraged to politically mobilize Madonnas to rally against women's basic human rights and social autonomy as a defensive tactic to protect their sexually restricted lifestyle of material and social dependence on their man. The Madonna's life strategy is patriarchal conformity, to be the resource that fuels men and nurtures children without men's participation, without community support, without social investments, so that she is sacrificing self to meet the essential needs of others and to produce fully grown adults for the state and for corporations to use and consume as laborers and soldiers without ever having to invest in the children's actual development. So the strategy is conformity, and it's important that we recognize this is a strategic choice, not a mandate. So today we're going to look at theories of evolutionary psychology that correlate to this political mobilization. So we're moving beyond strictly focusing on the Madonna Wh-re archetypes to look at patriarchal monogamy as a sexual strategy. So let's first recap a few key points before we jump into the evolutionary psychology of it all. We established that the greatest threat to the Madonna's social and material stability is the threat of her man stepping out with another woman and abandoning his family, abandoning his responsibilities. Since patriarchy does not hold men accountable for their actions, nor does it hold men responsible for meeting any standards of maturity or contribution, women are scapegoated for men's choices, for men's unreliability, for men's arrested development. So this pattern of scapegoating women for men's choices motivates patriarchal Madonnas to make it as costly and unsafe as possible for other women, the Wh-re archetype, to live outside of patriarchal monogamy. A woman without a husband owner means there is no man present to deter the Madonna's husband from seeking to step out and use the Wh-re, right? So Madonnas are patriarchal. They are competing to be chosen by a man. He is their prize and the sole source of their material and social and identity stability. And the best defense for keeping that man is to go on the offense against women, right? To force other women to live under patriarchal ownership as well. Men respect men, not women. Patriarchal women respect men, not women. Forcing other women to be owned and legally bound by a man, no matter how depraved that man is, no matter how useless or violent that man is. That strategy is about ensuring that the Madonna's husband does not have the opportunity to step out and abandon his family to secure an upgraded wife pet, right? And let's be clear. Madonnas are cool with forcing women into violent households and marriages. It increases their perceived value of their man and of their own selves, right? I am so special. I was chosen by a non-abusive man. It's a shame that she wasn't special and pure and good like me. That's why she's in a bad marriage where he treats her like garbage. If only she was better like me, she would have been chosen by a better man. Right? And these are all like subconscious, self-righteous hits of dopamine, and it's all gross. So the will to violently enforce patriarchal conformity is often hidden behind save the children rhetoric. I'm not trying to limit women's freedoms and rights. I'm just trying to save babies. That's all. This isn't about me. It's about babies. So this functions to give it a palatable facade, right? And a sense of moral superiority for the Madonna adherents, plus claiming that you're not trying to limit women's freedoms out of sexual rivalry. You're just here to save the babies. That is an excellent way to short circuit any kind of critical thinking and rational conversation around women's rights, especially around abortion health care. You can always just say, I'm against murdering babies, to stop all conversation and to prevent uncomfortable introspection, and also to avoid the social burden of challenging patriarchal norms, no matter how irrational they are. I don't believe women have an inherent right to control their own bodies because I don't want to murder babies. Okay, well, denying abortion health care to a mother who is miscarrying so she dies a preventable death leaves her children motherless. No, you baby murderer, I don't want to murder baby. You see what I'm saying? It short circuits all rational dialogue while providing a hit of irrational self-righteousness, absolutely divorced from reality, which is the intention and purpose of pro-life propaganda. Also, this propaganda dehumanizes women by projecting an assumption that some women are evil, hot to the oars, who want to murder babies for sport or pleasure, when in reality, she's just a woman that needs health care or the opportunity to exercise her role in natural selection, right? The choice of which men are fittest to procreate with. A pregnancy created by force or accident or deception, where the woman now understands that man is not fit to be a partner or father, should be terminated. She has that right if she chooses to terminate it. That is her right and her role in natural selection. Men are not entitled to participate in that decision making, as women and females are the guardians of natural selection, not men or males. Bring it up with God, bring it up with Darwin, but don't bring it up here, because I am not here for the bastardization of natural selection that is patriarchy. Cool. All right. So with all of this in mind, let's jump into these theories of evolutionary psychology that correspond with all of these patriarchal wounds, and explain some of the contradictory political views involved with pro-life Madonnas who also oppose child welfare policies like free healthcare for pregnant people and babies, and like free school lunches. If you're pro-life, you are not about taking food out of babies' mouths. So I'm going to read this article from The Conversation by Jamie Arona Krems, professor of psychology with Oklahoma State University, and Marty Hasselton, professor of psychology with University of California, Los Angeles. I thank these authors very much for their amazing work and for authorizing the republishing of their work under Creative Commons license. Let's dive in. What really drives anti-abortion beliefs? Research suggests it's a matter of sexual strategies. Many people have strong opinions about abortion, especially in the wake of U.S. Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, revoking a constitutional right previously held by more than 165 million Americans. But what really drives abortion attitudes? It's common to hear religious, political, or other ideologically driven explanations. For example, about the sanctity of life. If such beliefs were really driving anti-abortion attitudes, though, then people who oppose abortion might not support the death penalty, many do, and they would support social safety net measures that could save newborns' lives, many don't. Here, we suggest a different explanation for anti-abortion attitudes, one you probably haven't considered before, from our field of evolutionary social science. Why do people care what strangers do? The evolutionary coin of the realm is fitness, getting more copies of your genes into the next generation. What faraway strangers do, presumably, has limited impact on your own fitness. So, from this perspective, it is a mystery why people in Pensacola care so strongly about what goes on in the bedrooms of Philadelphia or the Planned Parenthoods of Los Angeles. The solution to this puzzle, and one that is driving the anti-abortion attitudes, lies in a conflict of sexual strategies. People vary in how opposed they are to casual sex. Coco side note, when we're saying casual sex here, what we're really talking about is sex outside of patriarchal marriage, right? Outside of legal matrimony. More sexually restricted people tend to shun casual sex and instead invest heavily in long-term relationships and parenting children. In contrast, More sexually unrestricted people tend to pursue a series of different sexual partners and are often slower to settle down. These sexual strategies conflict in ways that affect evolutionary fitness. The crux of this argument is that, for sexually restricted people, other people's sexual freedoms represent threats. Consider that sexually restricted women often get married young and have children early in life. These choices are just as valid as a decision to wait, but they can also be detrimental to women's occupational attainment and tend to leave the women more economically dependent on husbands. Other women's sexual openness can destroy these women's lives and livelihoods by breaking up the relationships they depend on. So sexually restricted women benefit from impeding other people's sexual freedoms. Likewise, sexually restricted men tend to invest a lot in their children, so they benefit from prohibiting people's sexual freedoms to preclude the high fitness costs of being cuckolded. Coco side note. See, this is what I mean when I say that by default, our social logic and the way we frame things is always about scapegoating women for men's choices. That first sentence, other women's sexual openness can destroy these women's lives and livelihoods. You're talking about her man not being reliable to maintain his commitments, the vows he made in marriage to her. That has nothing to do with the other woman, right? The vows are between you folks. And I am not pro sleeping with people's husbands, blah, blah, blah. But if you want to look for the responsible party in that situation, it is not the other woman. Benefiting from making sex more costly. According to evolutionary science, restricted sexual strategists benefit by imposing their strategic preferences on society, by curtailing other people's sexual freedoms. How can restricted sexual strategies achieve this? By making casual sex more costly. For example, banning women's access to safe and legal abortion essentially forces them to endure the costs of bearing a child. Such hikes in the price of casual sex can deter people from having it. This attitude is perhaps best illustrated by a statement from Madonna Wh-re, a justice who opposed abortion when it came before Mexico's Supreme Court in 2008. Quote, I feel that a woman in some way has to live with the phenomenon of becoming pregnant. When she does not want to keep the product of the pregnancy, she still has to suffer the effects during the whole period. Forcing people to suffer the effects of casual sex, and fewer people will pursue it. Also note that abortion restrictions do not increase the cost of sex equally. Women bear the cost of gestation, face the life-threatening dangers of childbirth, and disproportionately bear responsibility for childcare. When women are denied abortions, they are also much more likely to end up in poverty and experience intimate partner violence. Coco side note, in America, the number one cause of death for pregnant people is homicide by their partner. More so than being denied abortion health care and bleeding out into the parking lot. More so than any medical complication that, pregnancy is genuinely life-threatening. Complications kill women. But more so than any medical complication or political denial of abortion health care, the number one killer of pregnant people is their baby daddy. I cannot emphasize this enough. Is being murked by the father of the child. Whew. And so beyond that truth, right, and the disproportionate increasing of the costs, we can look at sexually restricted strategists. These are inherently patriarchal strategists, right? Because all of this is centering the men by not even talking about them. It's all about women having to be forced to endure the pain and consequence of a mutual act. Sometimes that's not mutual, right? Right? When we're talking about sexual violence, not always mutual. But women are still expected to single-handedly endure the cost. All right, back to the article. No one would argue this is a conscious phenomenon. Rather, people's strategic interests shape their attitudes in non-conscious but self-benefiting ways, a common finding in political science and evolutionary social science alike. Coco aside, I think it's a spectrum. I think a lot of this is eyes wide open, and I think that's a deeply uncomfortable thing to admit. I think it is deeply uncomfortable to admit that my fellow woman, my fellow citizen, my fellow man, eyes wide open, intention to harm. And like some people, of course, they are not conscious of this, but a lot more of them are than we want to talk about, all right? Like these are conscious patriarchal decisions. Resolving awkward contradictions in the attitudes. An evolutionary perspective suggests that common explanations are not the genuine drivers of people's attitudes on either side of the abortion debate. In fact, people's stated religious, political, and ideological explanation are often rife with awkward contradictions. For example, many people who oppose abortion also oppose preventing unwanted pregnancy through access to contraception. From an evolutionary perspective, such contradictions are easily resolved. Sexually restricted people benefit from increasing the costs of sex. That cost increases when people cannot access legal abortions or prevent unwanted pregnancy. An evolutionary perspective also makes unique and often counterintuitive predictions about which attitudes travel together. This view predicts that if sexually restricted people associate something with sexual freedoms, they should oppose it. Indeed, researchers have found that sexually restricted people oppose not only abortion and birth control, but also marriage equality, because they perceive homosexuality as associated with sexual promiscuity and recreational drugs, presumably because they associate drugs like marijuana and MDMA with casual sex. We suspect this list likely also includes transgender rights, public breastfeeding, premarital sex, what books children can read, and if drag queens can read to them, equal pay for women, and many other concerns that have yet to be tested. No other theories we are aware of predict these strange attitudinal bedfellows. Behind the link to religion and conservatism. This evolutionary perspective can also explain why anti-abortion attitudes are so often associated with religion and social conservatism. Rather than thinking that religiosity causes people to become sexually restricted, this perspective suggests that a restricted sexual strategy can motivate people to become religious. Why? Several scholars have suggested that people adhere to religion in part because its teachings promote sexually restricted norms. Supporting this idea, participants in one study reported being more religious after researchers showed them photos of attractive people of their own sex. That is, potential mating rivals. Coco aside, this is really interesting, especially in the context where we're seeing a lot of young Gen Z men going back to Christian churches, and Gen Z women are not at the same level, right? And that makes sense, right? It's not that they suddenly found God, but Gen Z has been known to be more sexually restricted than millennials were. And, they're exposed on social media to potential mating rivals all the time, right? They're seeing all these manosphere influencers. They're like, you gotta have 6 figures and a 6-pack and like feeding them all this garbage. So, like, they're constantly inundated on social media with the perception of sexual rivals. And then they're already sexually more restricted. And it's like, of course they're running to the churches then. That aligns, that makes sense. But when we're talking about sexually more restricted, it's in the patriarchal sense, right? That women must be sexually restricted to be the property of one man. And that man, if he can get it outside the marriage, if that opportunity presents itself, well, come on, a man's a man, right? Like, that's the attitude. And of course they're flocking to the churches for that, because Christianity in the United States, hotbed for sexual predation, right? The Catholic Church, Southern Baptist Conference, like all of these Christian denominations have been roiled by massive sexual scandals over the past decades, right? And they don't do anything about it. They just shuffle around their pastors. Oh, he was targeting teenage girls and little boys. Send them to a different parish. And that's true if you're a Southern Baptist or a Catholic. Like, I'll link some articles in the description. We'll talk about it another time. But it makes sense because sexually restricted strategies are only for women, not for men under patriarchy. If they can get it, they'll get it. Back to the article. Sexually restricted people also tend to invest highly in parenting, so they stand to benefit when other people adhere to norms that benefit parents. Like religion, social conservatism prescribes parent benefiting norms, like constricting sexual freedoms and ostensibly promoting family stability. In line with this, some research suggests that people don't simply become more conservative with age, rather people become more conservative during parenthood. Coco aside, I think when we're talking about strategies that benefit parents, like in this context specifically, we're talking about things that benefit parental control. And that is not the same thing as benefiting children. And that's a really important nuance to call out. Because as we're always saying, patriarchy centers men, right? And the woman's around the man. Matriarchy centers children. So we are not talking about matriarchal sexual strategies here or social logic. And so favoring parental control does not necessarily equate to better outcomes for the children. It can, but it does not necessarily, right? So if you are in favor of parental control, where the parent says, I cannot have my children exposed to the existence of gay people, right? Like gay, queer, trans, drag queens, whatever. I will not tolerate my child being aware of their existence. Is that actually best for the child? That child may be queer themselves when they grow up. 2, they will definitely have peers that are queer, gay, trans, whatever. Is it healthy to demonize them, scare them, and teach them all these horrors and like dehumanize some of their peers from the get-go? Is that actually serving children's best interest? Their developmental interests? No, absolutely the freak not. So we have to be careful in the way that we frame things, right? Like parental control and what's best for children. They are not always opposed. They are not always aligned. All right, restricting everyone to benefit yourself. There are multiple answers to the why question in scientific research. Ideological beliefs, personal histories, and other factors certainly play a role in people's abortion attitudes, but so too do people's sexual strategies. This evolutionary social science research suggests that a restricted sexual strategist benefits by making everyone else play by their rules. And just as Justice Thomas suggested when overturning Roe v. Wade, this group may be taking aim at birth control and marriage equality next. This article came out in 2022, and yeah, now we're seeing that, right? There is an official petition to remove marriage equality before the Supreme Court. Hag of the ages, Kim Davis, she's really a troll. She's the one that got arrested for denying a gay couple a marriage license right after. Long story short, she's like, I'm back, I need attention, and I need to cause hell on earth for people I don't like. So yeah, they're coming for marriage equality next, just as this article suggested. All right, let's debrief from that. Overall, I enjoyed this article's perspective and I felt nourished by learning about it, right? But we got to be really clear. All of these theories reflect patriarchal sexual strategies, and humans are not limited or even hardwired for patriarchal sexual strategies. We live in a patriarchal environment for thousands of years. That is the social environment that we have been responding to. So yes, the evolutionary strategy, that makes sense, right? Because evolutionary strategies are responding to the environment. And that's not all just nature. That's also the cultural environment, because humans are social creatures, right? We're interconnected creatures. So let's recognize none of these theories are mandates, right? They're not hardwired, and we're not helpless to prevent them from overtaking all of our lives, right? It's just that the strategy has been rewarded and reaffirmed for many generations through a collusion of violence and the enforcement of patriarchal social systems that rob women of autonomy to artificially elevate men into positions of irrational authority and unaccountability. Once again, all through a collusion of violence, hoarding of resources, and manufactured shame. That's a big part of what the churches are all about. Manufacturing shame onto women. But yeah, they're absolutely coming for gay marriage next, and they're going to be coming for birth control, and we got a lot of resistance work to do together, right? And I've heard a lot of people say, oh, this is the extinction burst, the last desperate stand to reassert these patriarchal strategies as mandates through a collusion of violence and fascism. And listen, I am inclined to agree that this is an extinction burst and a showdown, right? That's why we cannot sit it out. That's why we have to keep resisting in every capacity. And I know there are so many. There's like, what's going on in America now is like, But we don't need to fall victim to fear-mongering or defeatism, all right? Like, recent developments in America, I've seen a lot of people be like, is this when the Civil War starts and blah, blah, blah? And like, I don't know. But I am not resigned to defeatism because these patriarchal people and fascists would not be mobilizing so hard right now, gunning so hard, if they actually thought that they were secure in their position of power. If they actually thought that what they were building right now is sustainable. And it's effing not. But I know it is very disheartening and chaotic. But we are not defeated. We are in resistance. And resistance is repetition. It is a repetition of fighting off the path of least resistance within our own selves, where we get apathetic and defeatist vibes of, they already took it all away. No, F them. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep marching. And we are not going to let them win. Because we have the courage, the moral clarity, and the commitment to refuse to surrender our human rights, no matter how loud, how cruel, or outlandish their attacks become. We have the humility and the stamina to keep speaking truth in the face of propaganda, lies, and threats over and over and over, so that the repeated exposure to truth can help erode some people's conditioned prejudices and they can come back into the fold, right? Because the opposite of truth is prejudice. We must repeat the truth and resist prejudice to stave off the reactionary backlash to freedom across the board. We also must recognize that many people are motivated by feeling superior, right? A lot of the Madonna's mobilization is about feeling superior. They will claim and defend whatever makes them feel superior to others without actually having to master anything. Master themselves, master skills, master maturity. Feeling superior to another group is the cheapest way to feel good about yourself without actually having to develop self, right? Self-esteem, self-empowerment, the ability to live as an individual self, not a social role that has been assigned to you, not as the appendage of another person or of a concept. So as I said in the beginning of our chat, we're talking about the will to conform, conforming to violent and degrading social norms and roles to receive social status of irrational superiority and to avoid the work of becoming an individual, standing for true values, and like enduring freedom. Because what's unspoken here is they cannot endure freedom. They need conformity to feel safe, even if that conformity hurts them. So I'm going to end on this note. Carl Jung wrote that the show is over when the audience leaves. The right-wing reactionary violence and subjugation that we're seeing now across the board is an attempt to forcibly keep the audience, to force us to participate in their patriarchal, white supremacist, capitalistic systems of exploitation, of fear, of degradation, and abuse. Keep refusing. Because when you feel subjugated, know that they are codependent on extracting from you. If they cannot trap you in their systems, they collapse. You have strength, you have power, you matter, and you do not need to succumb. Thank you so much for watching. You can check me out on TikTok at Coco Has Ideas, Instagram, Paraculture Coco. As always, I have free articles up at powerculturecoco.substack.com. And please drop a line in the comments. Is there a topic you would like to discuss here? This is a community, two-way street. Honestly, this whole series was inspired by a user comment. I really do love hearing from you. Drop a line and let me know what's up. And I will see you again next week.